Quartzsite personalities. That is definitely an interesting question.
Okay.
It's just this little quirky little town in the middle of nowhere. You don't think anything happens because that's what everybody thinks. It's a sleepy little Quartzsite. Nothing happens here. But if you look back and you start peeling back those layers on the onion, you start realizing what's really going on here and what's gone on. It's crazy.
Thank you very much.
Those of us that live here during the summertime, we're considered the oddballs. It's a wide spectrum of who comes here.
Everything. There's no stereotype. I mean, I've met the full gamut of personalities and people and from places. I mean, there's no stereotype at all. It's a true melting pot.
You got your drifters that come in, you got your snowbirds from Canada, you got your, everybody, so many different places, Montana, Minnesota, Illinois, it's just everywhere.
I run an RV park. I've got people from South Dakota. I've got them from Colorado. I have them from Oregon, Washington.
You have a lot of people who come to Quartzsite from all over the country, mostly in the western U.S. And they find a place there. They may not have found a place, wherever it was they were, but they found it in Quartzsite.
One day I looked out the garage. Tractor was sitting here and the trailer slightly behind it. It kind of looked like it was hooked together the way they were sitting. And I got thinking I built me some side racks and put a top on it, load my stuff in there and head south. And I did.
What I meant to do was come through here, spend a day or two, and then head on to Death Valley, and after that kind of take stock and decide what to do next. I ended up staying here for about a month and a couple weeks now and getting a job, so I took my time. I actually traveled with two documentary journalists who would stop everywhere and do stories on stuff.
Have you met the Naked Bookseller? One of Quartzsite's most well-known residents. He was actually a musician and a comedy writer.
Before I became a naked bookseller on the main street of Quartzsite, Arizona, I spent 25 years as Sweet Pie. I was a naked boogie-woogie and blues piano comedy cabaret performer who worked starting in Vermont in the ski areas, branching out through all New England, into colleges, beach resorts, and coast to coast, and north and south in all the provinces of Canada. And we ended up here, much to my surprise, a town willing to tolerate a naked guy in a G-string selling books on Main Street. Makes Quartzsite a pretty unusual place.
He's a character. Characters like that find homes in Quartzsite.
There's something really special about Quartzsite.
Well, you've met Rain. Okay, she's an eccentric character.
We have a wonderful group of clothing optional campers out in the desert and the BLM camping, and they're called Magic Circle.
But then you have like the nudist colony that we actually have out there.
And that's just another lifestyle that people come here for, and the weather's good for it. I wouldn't want to be in one in Idaho this time of year, so I guess they prefer to come to the desert.
People come here from all around the world, and they just feel drawn to be here.
We've been called here to do something.
We're gonna hug a cactus. And I mean, this is Ash Jack the movie. We're gonna do this thing the right way, or we're not gonna do it at all. I love you, Arizona.
Ow, God damn it, that's gonna leave a mark.
God damn it. Don't try this at home, kids. Oh, am I gonna get out? I'm impaled here. I'm impaled. Merry Christmas. We're going all out for you here, guys. I mean, all out. Have some mistletoe.
Is there something in the water? Or in the heat? It's crazy.
I said, hello, Silver. Hello,
When I lived 25 years in a van, I lived outside the van. The van was my nest. So I could accumulate only what I needed to make my shows and to have a few things to read or occupy my mind with. And that was it.
I actually met a Chemehuevi elder named Alfredo Figueroa, and he is the keeper of sacred sites with the BLM. He explained that there are sacred sites around Quartzsite. If you look on the map, you'll see the Blythe intaglios and the Bouse fishermen. They are they're pretty close in alignment, straight across from each other. And then there's a sacred site up in Parker and another sacred site down near Stone Cabin. He drew it kind of like a kite, and Quartzsite is in the middle of those sacred sites. So people may be feeling that there is something special and they don't even know what it is.
I would say that the earliest quartzsite that I have any familiarity with started out really with French miners that were here, built a lot of the stone cabins that were here, and did hard rock mining and placer mining. Of course, Indians before that.
This town was established mainly for the people building the Old West, the pioneers traveling to California, coming for the gold rush, coming for the gold here, or to work the steamboats going up and down the Colorado River.
Then following that, you had the more sophisticated mining with bigger companies and people moving in, and you got the Kofa area here. The Kofa Mountains were named for the King of Arizona mine, which was the major activity there. Huge mine. Probably the biggest mine in the area, so it brought in a lot of people, a lot of activity. And then you had, what I would say, the pioneer families, which were, some were part of that, some weren't, that established a lot of the early businesses and activities.
Well, they've got this huge gem and mineral show each September and October.
People come to Quartzsite traditionally in the wintertime for rocks and gems. That's the big deal in Quartzsite.
About 2 years ago, a friend of mine had come to me and said, hey, have you ever been to Quartzsite? And I was like, yeah, I was just there the year before looking around. It's pretty cool.
Almost nobody is originally from Quartzsite.
I was ditching winter over there in Montana.
Quartz, it's right in the name of the town.
But as time progressed, all right, I adjusted my schedule.
They're from Minnesota, Washington, Connecticut, from all over the country.
And since I nomadically all the rest of the year spend time traveling, okay, well, that made life easy for me. I could come and survive here in the winter.
Part of the charm of Quartzsite is it's this very transient thing. People are there, then they're gone, then they're there, then they're gone.
And do what I do best is sell, and I enjoy the rock life, I enjoy the minerals. It's like a heaven for a lot of us. That's why we're here. It's nothing more than a giant heaven. We've been called here to do something.
And the town just becomes flooded with what we affectionately call snowbirds.
That's all I know what to do, is get on the road and go.
And it's always been a senior citizen kind of place.
Mostly elderly folks coming in to enjoy the festivities, which include rock and mineral shows.
So many have strapped themselves from paycheck to paycheck in these homes, in these conditions. They don't know what else to do.
Endless swap meets and all kinds of other festivals, I guess you'd call it.
You go buy a house today, in today's world, you're not getting out of that payment. Look at it. It's stretched out. By the time you pay it off, you're so old, you can't remember what you started with.
I used to joke, you know, that the entire town is on wheels. You could pick it all up in a day and it would be gone.
Our bank used to be in a motorhome. They had driven it in, taken the wheels off, laid a cement foundation, and there was only room for 2 people to be in the bank at one time.
And how they wind up here, they're like tumbleweeds, you know? They just, the wind blows them, and this is where they run up against a fence or a rock, and they stop there. They end up in a trailer, because most of the town lives in trailer parks.
It's an extreme seasonal swell. So you've got, you know, in the summertime, it's just a few thousand people, if that. Sometimes it just feels extremely dead.
The way Quartzsite gets populated is somebody comes out to spend a few weeks or months in the wintertime when it's beautiful there, and then they end up just staying and they become a member of the community.
Generally, they're not sedentary.
It's not an easy life. I don't recommend it for everybody and their brothers.
And then in the wintertime, it's the exact opposite. It's just this throng of people.
The big tent comes in. They just set up with tables, and there's all kinds of vendors about RVing, about tiny houses.
And they kind of organized the rock activities. They created the Gem and Mineral Show, the powwow, like 53 years ago. And it's been a mainstay of the community.
About how to own foods instead of ordering it online, drying their foods. They're taught that in this place.
People came in to see that, and you started to get the winter visitor thing going on. And then you have the BLM lands associated with that, where you can camp inexpensively and for a long period of time.
Yeah, I think Quartzsite does attract a certain type of character, and you still see it today that you saw, 25 years ago, which there's a large transient population.
You couple all that stuff together, and it started to create kind of a loose sense of community and things to do. And that's kind of how Quartzsite grew, kind of almost like Topsy, but it's been always focused on the outdoors, the scenic beauty of the area, the affordability, and rocks.
George Washington Connors was mainly known as Buck Connors. I just did this at the cemetery a couple of weeks ago, the whole thing, only I get in character.
Our mayor of Quartzsite is Norm Simpson. He actually found out that he looks like Buck Connors in Buck Connors' last years of his life.
Well, that's because he looks like Buck Connors. Yeah. Well, he doesn't really, but he looks, he does resemble him, but no.
And when I do Buck Connors, I start out with the language he would have talked in the 1800s. My given name was George Washington Connor, but most folk knowed me by Buck. And as a young'un, I was sent away for schooling, but when I was done with my book learning, then I was suspected to work the farm. I wanted more excitement than farming, so I made my way to Texas, where I hired onto a cattle ranch as a buckaroo. Soon I was lassoing and branding and busting broncs. I weren't very tall, so the natives working at the ranch dubbed me as Little Buckshot, so I've been known as Buck evermore.
George Washington Connor, best known as Buck Connors, is one famous person who positively influenced and affected the history of Quartzsite. He was a famous actor, showman, military man, lawman, chaplain, homesteader, pilot, family man, and a resident of Quartzsite. Born in Streator, Illinois in 1880, and he died in Yuma, Arizona in 1947. Buck was buried in a tiny gravesite plot in Quartzsite, behind what was the Best Mex Chinese restaurant on Main Street. In 2008, to honor and remember Buck Connor's contributions, his grave was moved to the Pioneer section at High Jolly Cemetery.
I'm not exactly sure how he found out or knew that Buck Connors was buried here, but he actually owned property here and he was buried here. Since then, his family has sold off the property, and one of the current owners of the property, there were the grave sites on the property and he didn't want them there any longer. So he called into the town of Quartzsite and told them that they had like an hour to get out there and move these two grave sites, which ultimately they did. They moved them into the cemetery. But because of the amount of time that they had to try to get these grave sites moved, there's parts of Mr. Connor that are still on his property and parts of him that are in the cemetery. We are trying to work to get him all into the cemetery, but we haven't quite got there yet. But so he's like part of him is in his property and part of him is in his cemetery.
So he's all over Quartzsite?
He's all over Quartzsite, literally.
We're a community of about 3,500, 4,000 full-time residents. During our peak season, which is January, February, we see an influx of 100,000 to 250,000 people over a course of a month or 2 months.
There was a schoolie meetup happening kind of coinciding with RTR, and so we came out for that.
So I'm Preston Smith. I've been doing this just since May of 2018. We've been living full-time in the bus. So it's me, my wife, and then we've got 3 kids.
It's amazing to see all of these people out here. I've never seen so many campers. Obviously, this is like one of the biggest gatherings of nomads.
Well, the Census Bureau says the summer population of Quartzsite is somewhere around 3,600 people, I believe.
My name is Dean. This is my bus. I still call her Felicia, but it's now the schoolie. Just kind of a branding thing that's worked well.
I live in a 28-foot school bus. We call it the Frugal RVer, with my husband and my 3-year-old daughter.
My name is Monica. I'm from Buffalo, New York. I've been living there about 22 years.
Do you want to start?
You start.
I don't want to start.
Okay.
My name is Jordan Saglio. I'm originally from a little town in Massachusetts. This is Kaylee. She's also from a little town in Massachusetts. Yeah.
And
about 2 years ago now, I was working a corporate marketing job. Kaylee was an esthetician. She was giving facials and working in a spa.
Yeah.
Stephen Cobb. I'm known as Steampunk Steve. I've got a 99 Bluebird.
We had a house. We both had cars, brand new cars, and we were living that American dream.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years to convert it from being a school bus into the home that I live in now for the last 2 years on the road.
And 3 years ago, I saw a book by Bob Wells about living in a van, and I thought that was an interesting idea.
I walked into work one day and I was laid off.
I'm Gus McTavish. I'm a Canadian, and I found myself retired in a relatively small apartment with a limited income.
Called Kaylee on the phone. Started screaming. She was so happy, and then we bought a bus the same day and built it out into our little home. Yep.
When we started this lifestyle, it rocked everyone's world in our community from home. They thought that we were like, are you broke? Do you need help? Is there something wrong? Why are you doing this? Why do you want to quit your job? You have everything you need.
So I bought a bus because it's the cheapest of all of the alternatives there were to travel and carry more or less all of the household and camping gear that I need.
We get an influx of winter visitors from all over the country and outside of the country.
We wouldn't be here if we didn't enjoy it, but everyone's got their own motivation.
Some people have been, I don't want to say forced into it.
I think everyone's doing it for their own different reasons.
But circumstances have made it so that they've realized it's less expensive to buy fuel than to pay rent.
During the summer months, there's a population of maybe 3,500. But in the winter, it could go up to, well, some winters, some winter weekends, you've got 100,000 people in Quartzsite.
A lot partake in the shooting, they go out in the desert and enjoy that, and it's lots of different draws. Some come, enjoy the off-roading aspect, some just enjoy the peace and tranquility of the desert, some stargazers, some music lovers.
And it's becoming a four-wheel off-road center. It's going to have a 200-mile trail. Campgrounds along it, access to every town, in the western long half of Arizona. That's its future.
If you're living in the Quartzsite area and you have an ATV, you can go explore anywhere, even if you have a walker. And it provides a freedom, and my personal theory is that we're getting very crowded, and although we're tribal as humans, there's a certain amount of need for open space and personal space, and that in itself has a healing component. You have that ability to go in that direction here.
The river's about 20 miles away. The border crossing in Yuma's just an hour and a half.
One of the most difficult things to run is utilities that are not constant.
When I was younger, it went to 1.5 million people that would come to Quartzsite.
The amount of volume you need to handle during the summer compared to the winter is enormous. When you think that a lot of these people are dry camping out on the desert, it's also illegal for them to dump their holding tanks out on the desert. So they hit all the RV pit stop and the various places around town, or they'll go into an RV park, stay one day, dump their holding tank, and then go back out and dry camp. So you have this huge increase of volume to the wastewater plants all at once, during the winter months. You have to be able to handle that capacity, but then again, during the summer, the off months, you don't have enough volume to keep the plant operating.
3,000 people in the summer is not really feasible. I believe that it is because we can't sustain our small town during the summer.
So do you shut down the plant and haul sludge to Blythe and pay them to process it? Or do you downsize your plant to operate it during the winter and then try to increase the volume through Blythe or somebody else? This is all the battles that go on how do you do it.
You've got safety issues here. OSHA was in here too and said you've got safety issues in your water treatment plant, your sewer plant.
Quartzsite's mainly on septic, and there are problems with some underground pollution and other things resulting from that, and the federal government has said you cannot install any new systems You either have to upgrade your treatment plant or no growth.
They issued a "thou shalt not put another septic tank in here until you address the problem of what you're going to do."
So for the community to grow constructively, we need to improve the sewer plant.
We had to do something to get that fixed and repaired, because otherwise the state was going to take over one of our sources of income.
We're a very seasonal city. It grows in October, November, December, January. It gets busy. February it's busy, and then it drops down, and we're glad everybody's gone, and summertime's here, and we get the boats and jet skis and go playing, and I go traveling myself most of the time.
Darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, you and I stand on forever.
Quartzsite comes out of a dead sleep and wakes up big time.
But it goes from real peace and quiet for a long period of time to chaos for a shorter period of time. And I like both seasons. I always tell people we have two seasons, snakes and snowbirds. Right now, snakes is the much longer season. You get a noticeable difference in the increase in business. Town almost like doubles and doubles. And by the middle of the second week in town, it is booming. And the shows start. And for 2.5 weeks, it is a money mill.
Then they went after the funding, which they got, to create a sewer treatment plant and to create the pipelines for handling sewer here in town. And then they pursued it further and started working on the water system. And of course, they ran up against the nitrate plume issues. And ADEQ was a constant presence here up until fairly recently because of the contamination in certain aquifers. And that was in, I think, 78. Then came something called the Quartzsite exception. And that was a letter written by ADEQ which stated, okay, we understand that you can't grow without having a way to handle sewage, so there will be a Quartzsite exception which says you can put in sewer septic tanks, but they have to go through the health department and they have to meet certain standards. At that point, everybody that was in government, that's what drove creating the town, because they realized that they could get funding to create a sewer plant by becoming a municipality. And they did. That is how the town became the town, to a great degree. The town was incorporated, and Oldham became the first mayor.
Eventually, my understanding is they stopped electing him, which is why they created a position of mayor, separate from the council.
Richard Oldham ran and was elected as the first mayor, along with, town council of whatever configuration that had 5 or 7 members, and, they became an incorporated town.
He was a council member, and then at that time, the council chose the mayor. And then it got to a point where the council stopped choosing him, and so he filed the petitions and got the signatures to create the position of mayor so he could specifically run for the job of mayor.
I believe he was appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
I think it was 1988. The people in La Paz County felt like they weren't getting anything from their tax money going to Yuma.
La Paz County was created by dividing Yuma County into a new county.
Yuma is in the very corner of the county. It's practically on the Mexico border.
There was a vote in 1982, and the county commenced in January 1983.
County wasn't even made until 1983. Quartzsite came into being in 1989, September.
When these people up north decide that they want to secede from Yuma County, they go through this procedure that's written in the Arizona Constitution and in statutes that nobody thought anyone would ever use. It was like, okay, we'll make these rules, but nobody's just done. Well, there were a lot of people that were, lack of a better phrase, with that done.
Within a few years after that, and it seemed like the date of 1989 was mentioned as the incorporation, there was interest being expressed in Quartzsite to incorporate.
It wasn't really the brightest move. Reason being is that, you've got this enormous territory that's part of a county that has a tax base. There's some commercial flow between Mexico and the U.S. that's in that area down in Yuma, but there's, that doesn't really trickle up to here. Whichever legislature came up with this, or the Constitutional Convention that came up with this, just didn't think it was going to happen, but it did.
Richard Oldham is a long-time resident of Quartzsite. He's probably like a third or fourth generation Quartzsite resident. His family's been around here forever.
He goes way, way back.
Originally in this town, there were like 7 different families. It was 5. Hawkins, Cloud, Oldham, Bird, and Tran. Of all of them, they're gone, except for Oldham and Tran.
Very powerful man, very political.
Like all small towns, we have, to use the expression of our town attorney at the time, we have a great white swimming instead of a shark in an ocean in a swimming pool. Like big fish in a little pond, we have a great white in a swimming pool.
Richard, I believe, was the mayor at one point and may have held a council seat a time or two, but he's always somehow been involved in politics, whether it's indirectly or directly.
What happened in Quartzsite is an unpopular man years ago got elected as first mayor. In his dealings with being the mayor of the town, he wanted to get a better water system plan for the town. He also included his property. So there's been unrest ever since the town became a town.
They called me the founding mayor because I worked real hard to get the town incorporated. Mostly for water and sewer is what my object was.
That great white wanted certain things to happen and was used to doing certain things a certain way. And when life made that great white accountable, that person didn't like it. and set in motion a whole bunch of other things, most of which were destructive, all of which camouflaged what the Great White was doing.
So, are you talking about the chief or are you talking about the mayor?
Neither.
Oh. No, I'm intrigued.
He is still in town and runs a business here in town.
Well, he's down at the car yard there next to Lifestyles. You can find him there.
You know, the classic car business that's here in town, all those classic cars that are around. Well, that was the person that really drove this town for a long time. And that's the energy that drove what happened.
That's like the source of it.
Yes.
He was just a bad politician, bad local politician. Got about the reputation he deserved. Pariah.
He was trying to figure out why the door opens this way. And you've probably heard the answer. But look how much easier it is to just get out. You just swing your leg out, put your feet down, and it's out of your way. Now, why isn't that a good idea? The danger in it is, and I had this happen to me, you open that door about 60 or 70, it'll yank you right out of that seat.
At some point, I know they probably had to have owned half this town. And I know his family's been around here since its heyday in the early 1900s. That's how long that family's been here.
A lot of towns have this. You know, they've got the big wheel. And that big wheel is used to doing things in a certain way. And the more you grow up as a town, the more accountability is involved, the more planning and zoning gets involved, code enforcement, and all those other things. All of it combines to create more oversight, more eyes on the situation. So that big fish in a little pond can't do what they used to do as easily. And so what does the big fish in the little pond do? He tries to control that oversight. If that doesn't work, then he tries to fragment it.
Why would someone try to tear down a municipality, break them to the point of, you know, hey, let's go bankrupt? Why? I don't know why that would be. There was a lot of speculation that Richard Oldham wanted the town to fall apart and then he could come in and save the day.
I'm a little more jumpy than, so if you can do it without this, we can, but if as broad as that is, I can't do it.
At that time, there was a group of folks, and they called themselves a coalition, the Quartzsite Citizens Coalition or something like that.
Those guys, oh my goodness, Richard Oldham and Deborah and all them, they spent every waking moment dwelling into everything they could dig up. And they take the tiniest little thing and blow it into a gigantuan thing. And, you know, it was pretty scary. It was like, God, guys, give it up, give it a rest, you know, and they wouldn't. And, you know, they just wouldn't give up on it. And so, you know, after a while, it was like, what's true and what's not?
He and his girlfriend were running the coalition meetings when I first started going to them.
I'm asking for the mayor to resign his office for the following reasons. For continuing to align himself with the Reform Coalition Group as its nominal head.
So they were active participants. They approached me because they wanted me to attend their meetings to understand how bad town hall was.
Members of this radical organization are engaged in an ongoing conspiracy to commit sedition and have been for at least a year.
I do know that he was an active participant and he was attending a lot of the meetings. They were angry and They continued to be angry. And it seemed like they enjoyed being angry, even after facts were told and proven.
Their objective is the elimination of all elected town officials and selected town staff.
They were angry at the chief of police, they were angry at the town manager,
i.e. the town manager and chief of police, among others, and replace them with their anarchist counterparts by any means necessary.
how corrupt everything was. And so I started attending, and I went to quite a few of the meetings. Solutions didn't seem to be the focus of their meetings. There was a gang mentality. They met the night before the council meeting.
The mayor and members of this group have brought several lawsuits against the town, its staff, and members of the council. To date, all have been dismissed, either due to a lack of evidence or because they were lacking in merit.
They had a plan of, okay, who's going to say what? Who's going to be angry about this? I'm going to say this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong.
Their methods vary, but for the most part consist of disruption during council meetings by shouting, dissemination of false information, such as disinformation, misinformation, perception management, and when all else fails, outright lies.
So there were forces inside that were working against the truth.
There's retaliation. There's a real factor of retaliation.
And there are a lot of caring people there. There's a lot of volunteers. But boy, if they don't like you, they'll rip you to shreds. You know, they'll snub you. They'll put you out of business. They'll do whatever they can to get rid of you.
So it's fear, not putting themselves out there. It's an actual fear.
Yeah, I would say it probably is.
And you think that fear is legitimate because of litigious reasons or because of actual harm?
Well, in my mind, it's litigious reasons, but in other people's minds, it may not be. It may be hardcore physical reasons. I don't know. But in my mind, it's more litigious because that's how I dealt with Oldham, was through litigation.
There was a huge amount of fear that we had to battle.
One of the guys that lived in our park went missing quite a few years ago now, and and then they found him 3 months later out in the other end of Skadden Wash with, you know, a snowbird found him laying there, but we knew he was buried. He had to have been. There would have been nothing left to him if he had been left outside.
Why won't anybody just say that? It seems like a pretty easy thing to say.
Because he's still lurking out there and he's litigious.
Do you mind saying who that was?
I'd rather not.
Okay.
You have to be careful about what you say and how you say it.
Do you feel comfortable saying who that is?
I'd probably rather not say it.
Fair enough.
With Richard Oldham, I don't know. I wouldn't even want to try to venture a guess or a comment.
I've seen all the paperwork. I've seen it from day one, and I've known this is the situation, and he knows I know it.
Who is Richard Oldham and what role did he play?
Richard Oldham.
We've had deaths here in town since that haven't been solved.
You know, there's been murders in the town, and they take years and years and years to figure out who it is, and then they botch the thing, and the guy goes free, you know, and stuff like that. And
they were fighting over City Hall, and the fight really got dirty.
There's always been political turmoil here in this community.
Quartzsite over the years?
The early history of Quartzsite post-incorporation was just ugly.
I have never experienced this level of insanity. I have never experienced this level of hatred and fear.
The population, the year-round population, summer population, that 3,600, I think the median age is something like 75 years old or something like that. It's amazing the age there.
I think one of the most shocking things to me was how adamant these retirees were about fighting.
We had a lot of elders in our community that did not deserve that.
Almost all of them were retired. They didn't have a lot else to do.
They're all retired in that town. Nobody has a damn thing to do.
You think of, retirees as, wanting to go into the sunset and enjoy their time. Boy, these people love to fight about everything.
So when it hit there bigger and harder than it probably would in other towns where people are distracted by their jobs and their other interests.
A lot of them were retired, they had time. It's a small town, you're right there. You can talk to people, you can go to the meetings. There's not a lot of barriers to participation.
And also when it hits in these small towns, it's completely different in one respect from when it happens in a big town or a big city, and that is everybody knows everybody. And when everybody knows everybody and the politics get personal, it's a catfight.
Quartzsite had that reputation as being a pretty tough place on government officials and politicians. There was an old joke told down there that in Quartzsite a blender could run against a toaster, and it would be a highly contested, hot, petty, backstabbing political campaign, and they'd each get about half the votes.
Until we were incorporated, the county sheriff's department handled all the law and order.
It's a remote area. We're a small town.
And they had 3 deputies per shift for the entire county.
This is a very large county, but it's sparsely populated, so to speak, with only about 20-something thousand full-time residents.
Which is 20,000 plus people in the county.
You have a lot of land and a small population.
So there really was no law and order here.
There's a draw to that. To being in the desert, to being out in the middle of nowhere, and you assume nobody's going to bother you because, like rattlesnakes don't bother each other.
We have everything a major city would have. With an interstate that comes through town, of course, you get anything and everything you can imagine.
Most towns run by rules and everything. There's no rules. Basically, everybody just kind of does what they want to do.
A lot of times there's one trooper and maybe one police officer and one deputy in this area.
And a lot of people remembered that and celebrated that.
Do you think it was inevitable?
Yes. I think it catches up with every, if you become a municipality, as soon as you incorporate, you invite a really heightened level of scrutiny on how you do things.
And that was kind of the joke, is that there was a honeymoon period there in the first year or two with this brand new government entity, La Paz County, taking in these stellar places like Quartzsite. Everybody's really cooperative and excited about this government, La Paz County, but there's a honeymoon period, and within a year or two, people were going to hate La Paz County because counties do what counties do. They fuck with their citizens. They tax them, they zone them, they fine them, they make them get permits for shit, and nobody liked that.
And so when all of a sudden your town government is changing, they don't like it. They want it back to the way it was.
It's all the same mindset. They're just going to do whatever they want to do and to hell with everybody else.
Quartzsite, especially in the late 80s, was still really Wild West. It was Wild West in a way that the West was never wild.
Shortly after I came here, there was a shootout at one of the RV parks right on Main Street over a dog barking.
We have had fugitives out here.
One fellow shot the other, Didn't kill him, but hit him in the leg, I think.
They get a lot of dope and a lot of wanted people. And
of course, the guy confessed and went to jail, and I don't know what happened to the dog.
You can go out there and be who you want to be, and nobody's going to bother you. And then all of a sudden, the social contract catches up with you.
That is the character here. It built to a crescendo in some ways. Certainly there were politics involved.
These guys, they only use the rules if it serves them. Mainly the council, the police, and all that.
The status quo doesn't really go for Quartzsite. People want to live free.
People come to places like Quartzsite for a multitude of reasons, but one of those reasons is just be left the hell alone.
They can live for practically nothing down there, And what was odd is when I first moved there, it was right around the time of the census, the 2010 census. I think it was in 2010. They could barely find anybody to go out and do the census to begin with. Nobody wanted to do the census. Oh, I'm not doing it. They're not going to invade my privacy. I'm not going to have the government watching me and knowing what I'm doing.
And it brought those people in.
Maybe, say, out of 1,500 people, 200 did the survey, did the census thing, because nobody wants to be found.
They don't want to be controlled by government.
There's probably about 50 child molesters in town, registered, non-registered. They've had several people, that did crimes in other states end up in Quartzsite. It's a place where people go to hide.
At that point, he was appointed the mayor.
In the early 90s, it was kind of Wild West. It was kind of do whatever you want.
And then you get the mess with Rex Byrd, who was the mayor that won. And when he won, that was when the mess of, him being jailed for trying to kill the other Oldham.